Hi, friends. I'm Scott Giles, and welcome to my podcast that I do every Saturday at 2:30, which is a podcast I call 2:30 on Saturdays. I'm a life coach and a member of the National Guild of Hypnotists, a consulting hypnotist. And I talk about some aspect of life coaching or the hypnotic arts and sciences or related disciplines every Saturday. Today, I want to talk about the psychological and philosophical theory of archetypes. And I want to cover how I use them in my practice with my clients and also how I use them in my groups because I conduct four group sessions that are free for people who are living with cancer or their caregivers. And I do that every month. The definition of an archetype is simply a very typical example of a kind of person or thing. But I want to go deeper than that. I want to talk about the psychoanalytic theory of Carl Gustav Jung, Jung, one of the seminal thinkers in deep psychology. Jung believed that archetypes were something that emerged out of the collective unconscious mind. These things exist in all cultures, but they take on the form and characteristic of the culture where they arise. For example, one of the classic archetypes is that of the hero. Now, in Anglo-Saxon culture, that's going to manifest as someone like, King Richard, King Arthur, very prominent, people like, Franklin Roosevelt, perhaps, people who have a very clear, honorable position in the world. In ancient Greek culture, that hero manifests very differently. Those of you who may have studied ancient Greece will recall Aristophanes' play The Clouds, in which the characters do all kinds of underhanded and deceitful things, and the chorus steps forward to praise them because they were being clever. In that culture, being clever outweighed being honest. And so the hero was the clever person, not necessarily the most honest or honorable one. Now, Jung believed that there were certain archetypal events that we all experience: birth, death, separation from family, initiation. We don't have a strong initiatory culture in Western Hemisphere civilizations, but sort of could be, a bar mitzvah, a bas mitzvah, first confirmation, a naming, that sort of thing. Marriage, sexual congress, the first one, were all considered archetypal events that, to some degree, shape a person. Now, he also believed that there were certain themes that could be found in literature and in mythology that everyone seemed to share. There's a whole long list of these things, but common ones: the Great Mother, the Celestial Father, the child, the devil, God, the wise old man, the wise old woman, the trickster, the hero, of course, and many others. For example, some of these you may not hear about, but like the Hoyer, which is the eternal boy, the young man that just refuses to grow up, like, trying to think of the example from literature, the person who just will not take on adult responsibilities. They're 40 years old and they're still living in their parents' basement and have no idea about what they're going to do with your life. These people are instantiating a fairly uncommon archetype, but I think we're seeing more of them. And that's part of what happens. They're the Peter Pan-like people who just won't grow up, and Peter Pan would be the example of that archetype. Now, we all have within us another couple of layers of deeper things. We have the shadow. The shadow is that part of your mind that has recorded every road not taken. And that becomes kind of your dark side. It is the part of you that you may deny. It is the part of you that you are not friends with. But Jung believed that you had to understand what your shadow side was. You want to be aware of your good qualities and proud of them, but also you needed to understood where your deficits were and where your darker side was. The anima. The anima is the image of the female held in the mind of the male, and the animus, which is the image of the male held in the mind of the female. Now, Jung did not deal with sexual fluidity, so I don't know how he would handle that. But certainly, the anima and animus are durable concepts. Part of the critique I have about patriarchy is that it injures all people equally. It injures men by cutting us off from our anima. We're not allowed to be in touch with our emotional side. The same time, it injures women by cutting them off from their animus, where they don't have the opportunity to be assertive and aggressive. Now, people have done lots of things with the notion of archetypes. For example, Joseph Campbell, in his book, The Hero of a Thousand Faces, is exploring the archetype of the hero as it appears in many different cultures and stories. Now, in his later work, Jung broadened the concept of archetypes to include something that was actually not just psychological, but physical. He believed that archetypes were actually built into the structure of matter. And as consciousness encountered that matter, the consciousness processed that by creating these images. So he began to believe that actually there was a structure to the universe of which the archetypes were a framework, and that as consciousness evolved, all forms of consciousness would manifest that framework. I'm not aware he ever said this, but he would believe that if there was a civilization in some other planet, they would also be encountering these archetypes and processing them in ways that would work for them. That consciousness is larger than just human and maybe even larger than animal. Now, I'm reminded of the work of a woman named Marie Kondo, a personal organization expert. I actually have a video about her stuff. She asks you to go through your stuff and keep only those things which spark joy. But she also says you should thank them. You should act as if they had a kind of consciousness. So you stand your clothing up after carefully folding them to thank them for the service that they've given to you. I don't actually do that, but I get the vibe that there may be something to awareness that is greater than just the human and the animal. Now, at the end of his life, Jung used the concept of a spectrum of light. We have the infrared, red, visible light, violet, ultraviolet. And what he came to believe was that, infrared was actually just the raw awareness, consciousness itself. Red was the animal part of us, our instincts. Visible light is what we consider our conscious mind. Violet is our spirituality, our philosophy, the larger things that we focus on and have a sense of transcendence about. And then the ultraviolet is where the archetypes were in the collective unconscious. So that's the theory. Let me explain how I use them with my clients and in my groups. And I use a tool to do this. And no, when I hold it up to the camera, it's going to get reversed. But I'll put a proper title when I edit this video for my YouTube channel. These are the archetype cards created by a medical intuitive and life coach, Carolyn Mice. Actually, she lived in the city of Oak Park, where I was a senior pastor at Unity Temple for many years. Now, each of these cards contain a archetype. There are 80 in the deck, and it has a light side and a dark side. And so I will sometimes ask a client, or I'll pass the box around in a group and have everyone just pull a card at random, to talk about how they instantiate both the light and the dark side of that archetype. I've just pulled 3 cards randomly. This is the Fool. The light attribute, fearlessly revealing emotion, helping people laugh at absurdity and hypocrisy. Well, yeah, I do this in my preaching. I'm known to have dry humor in my lectures as well. I try to use humor as a social lubricant and to increase rapport. The shadow attribute, using humor to wound rather than to liberate. Denial of your emotional truth. Well, I don't do that too much, but the danger is always there that I could use cutting humor to cut someone down and to hurt them, to choose words calculated to express contempt rather than debate ideas or feelings. So the potential is there, and the shadow attribute of the Fool reminds me to be careful about that. Here's one. The Gambler. The light attribute, willingness to follow intuition even when others doubt you. Well, that's definitely me. I'm a highly intuitive person. When I began my career so many years ago, there weren't many people doing hypnosis full-time and earning a good living at it, especially doing hypnosis with the medical community. I trusted my gut, my instincts. I thought I could make it work, and I did. The shadow attribute, relying on luck rather than hard work. Now, that was something I didn't do, but I could see it, the danger. I could get so caught up in my fantasy of what might be that I didn't actually do the hard work to manifest it. Now, I did that hard work. I often joke that I was an overnight success after 10 years of hard work because even while I was a parish minister, I was doing all kinds of continuing education in hypnotism, psychology, and so on. A final one, the athlete. The light attribute, dedicating to transcending physical limits, including handicaps, development of personal willpower, and strength of spirit. Well, I'm a martial artist. I'm a multiple black belt. I was the instructor of the traditional weapons of Japan and Korea in my dojang for a decade. I've studied Kundal Silat as well. So yeah, I push my limits. To some degree, I am an athlete, as all martial artists must be. The shadow attribute, misuse of athletic ability for selfish ends, false sense of invulnerability and entitlement. And that's something I am prone to, and I'm aware of that about myself, and I try to avoid it. I make it a conscious effort to police my thought for those kinds of thinking. But, you know, I'm capable of violence, and there are times when I've been tempted. So it's important that I be aware that that is the shadow of my athlete archetype, and I need to be vigilant about it. So this is how we use them. People will talk about themselves in light of the archetype, both light and dark aspects, and this deepens the rapport. Also, I'm a journal keeper. I've kept a journal since I was 15. These days, I use the bullet journal system, and I actually have a collection, which is what a section of a bullet journal is called, for the archetypes that I notice I'm instantiating in my life. This becomes a way of reflecting on myself and how my personality is evolving. If you're interested, the 2 most common archetypes that I instantiate are the magician and the outlaw. Bear in mind, I was once an outlaw biker. So that's how I use them. They deepen rapport and they help self-revelation and awareness. I urge you to give them a try. So, as always, thank you for your time and attention today. I will be back at 2:30 Saturday next week talking about something else. I'll be talking about prayer. So if I can be helpful to you, please feel free to reach out. In this time of the COVID-19 pandemic, we're only working online with clients, but that is completely effective. And if you want to do that, just let me know by email, through my website. And for those of you who are perhaps curious about the bullet journal, I will soon be making a video for my patrons on the Patreon network that is about how I do that. You might find it interesting. The Patreon group is there. It's not free. It's a small fee, but it's for those who want a deeper encounter with my work and thought. So thank you for your attention. Please like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you again. Bye-bye.